Hello and welcome to another episode of Father and Joe. I'm Joe Rocky here with Father Bonifant Six. And Father, I wanted to continue the conversation we were having our last episode and kind of clarify where we had a little stumbling block, to look in a broad perspective of trying to live as Christ and to apply his teachings to our lives to essentially make us better people. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what the end goal of being a Christian is to be more Christ-like. So one of the important things that you highlighted that is a pillar of the Catholic faith is that no matter how you look at it, Christ was a victim of death and crucifixion and much difficulty, especially throughout the Passion that we focus here upon Lent. And that's not really unique to him within the Bible. A vast majority of the prophets in the Bible had bad things happen to them at one point or another. So I wanted to kind of start with there because there's kind of a theme that, Christ is a victim. There's no way around it. But he also at the same time wasn't looking to be a woe is me, I need attention type of victim, the way that we might see it articulated in our life with other examples that, oh, this bad thing happened to me, so you can't make me accountable, as an individual example could be. So I wanted to discuss the difference there because obviously what Christ did was virtuous. He died for the sake of conquering sin. I mean, you can't really get higher than that ever. So I wanted to talk about the difference. And then again, this could be my perspectives wrong and I might be cold and callous, but to me, I see a difference between looking for problems that may or may not be actually real life problems and applying them to oneself so that you can claim to be a victim for attention compared to what Christ is actually calling us to do. So that's how I wanted to articulate this episode.
Yeah, there's a space in that starts to get into people's hearts in important ways, and I don't know that I've fully articulated all of the distinctions between maybe different categories of people. It seems like it seems like there might be a kind of person who weaponizes the bad things that have happened to them, and I think I can say that. I just want to be careful because there's sometimes the opposite happens, and sometimes we weaponize in the reverse. You're playing the victim, or you have a victim complex, or and that gets thrown at some people that don't deserve it. So I'm sensitive to the reverse because those are people that I work with and have been pressed under this accusation of having a victim complex or being self-pitying in a way uh, that I think is actually honest. There are people who are really suffering, who have had really hard lives, and suppressing that for the sake of having a stiff upper lip and forging ahead in order to not get the accusation from somebody else that they're acting like a victim doesn't help them. And we do suffer real things, and that does affect us in real ways. And being able to express that suffering is human and honest, and it deserves compassion. And there are yeah, and it's valuable to do that. And of course, that's a fair amount of the ministry that I do is receiving people who are really suffering. And my my approach with them is to receive that and enter into the suffering with them, and let them feel that and give them some space for that. Um, Sometimes, I like this distinction that I got from someone else. Sometimes there are wounds, which is what I just described, and those wounds need to be tended and compassion for them. And then sometimes you can have dirty wounds, and that's again where the sort of weaponizing of that comes from. There's a way to express our wounds that's really vulnerable, and where I open myself to someone else, and I could be rejected by them. I could be ignored by them. I could be yeah, cast off in some way by them. But I'm not but I'm taking that risk and opening my heart and sharing what's going on in my life and how I've suffered, and maybe in my past the things that have happened. So there's a vulnerable way of talking about the suffering that we've gone through, and then there's a kind of weaponizing way that I'm gonna shove it in your face, and I'm gonna use it as a political movement, and I'm gonna turn it into an agenda, and I'm going to wall off any self consideration because I'm going to hide behind this thing. So there's, that's what I would call sort of dirty wounds. Now there are real wounds there, and sometimes those walls that we put up or those weapons that we pull out are not best defeated by more weapons and bombs and destruction. It's like, well, you have dirty wounds and you weaponized your victimhood, and so I'm just going to crush you and cast you aside. Now, that's not the best approach, even for dirty wounds, or for that sort of weaponized victimhood necessarily. Now, we may have to say, well, I'm sorry, unless you're willing to, so maybe I was talking with somebody who works at a homeless shelter, and somebody who kind of comes in with a certain amount of entitlement and says, well, like give me this, you owe me this, and has a kind of hardened attitude towards what they ought to get. Now, I first of all see that as, well, how hard is it to be in that position, to feel so powerless, that you're on the street, that you don't have a home, you don't really have a right to anything, and nobody really has to listen to you. It must be terrible. I mean, it must really be terrible to be in that position. And so then it's understandable that somebody would want to kind of prop up and put some armor on, and even if it's only picking up a blunt instrument, trying to make a weapon out of it so that I feel like I have some power. And I think, the people I talk to who work at homeless shelters or soup kitchens, I think the initial approach tends to be, well, I'm going to start treating this person with dignity, because they do really have a stake. They're a human being made in the image and likeness of God. I'm going to start treating them with dignity. Now, if they continue to be demanding and offensive, even hurtful, or they start hurting other people, or they start abusing that, well, then I have to put up a wall and say, this can't go. We can't have this. There are, other people also have a right, and I have to respect that. And so, without demonizing the person, I say, well, we just can't help you right now. Or unless you're going to abide by this policy, you can't stay in this place. And there's a way we can do that that's not mean spirited, that's not accusatory, that's not destructive. And so I think that's the kind of thing that we aim at. Now, again, depending on when some kinds of victims have sort of mobilized and become not just an individual who's puffing out their chest and trying to claim some dignity by some behavior, but has become a movement and has wielded political power and is now starting to victimize others by their dirty wounds. Again, we deal with those things in different ways, but I guess I feel like it's worth making some of those distinctions. I feel like there are some people that are victimized because they just want to express, like, well, life is really hard, and I have been really hurt, and I need some extra help, and I'm looking for that. And even when I try harder, I keep falling and suffering. I keep having some of the same troubles, and I don't want that, but that's where I am, and I need the help. So I don't want to cast those people under the victim bus and and dismiss them, while recognizing that there are people who do put up walls. And again, I want to be compassionate even there. Sometimes people can't get in touch with their own vulnerability enough to ask for help in that more gracious way. And I want to give them the help in that way anyway. And if they still can't receive it in that way, again, then maybe there need to be some boundaries that are placed, and there do need to be criteria. I mean, we can't Yeah, we can't just control everybody because we've suffered or we've been hurt in certain ways.
Yeah, so to first address the macro point you're making there, every time there's been a movement with based upon those dirty wounds, as you said, that has taken over and literally overtoppled the government to put their own in. It's happened a number of times in the Latin part of the world. It has always been vastly worse for the common individual person than it was before. So, just as a historical note, but to talk about the micro, using your example of the individual at the homeless shelter, um, there you're showing that yes, you're in a spot where we don't know how you got to homelessness, but presumably something bad happened. And something bad happens to all of us. And this is kind of the extreme example that we have within our society. You can't really get worse than being homeless in our society. Um, so something bad happened that got you there, but you were still essentially called and required to better yourself in a capacity. And on the micro side, what bothers me and what I think that this is the difference that trying to call back to what Christ calls us to do. Okay, bad things happened. Sure, we all recognize that bad things happen to all of us. Um, and that might be the exact same event happen to three different people, and you'll have three wildly different outcomes based upon how they deal with said event. Some of it's preparation prior to the event, some of it's in the event itself, some of it's aftermath. But the way you deal with things and the way you prepare for things can put you into different situations. So we are called, by Jesus to keep preparing to be better spiritually so that we can move ourselves to be in a state of holiness. And I don't want to mix the metaphors here. So if this parable he gave is off from what he's trying to teach, because I know he gave parables specific to purposes, but what comes to my mind is when Jesus gives the parable of the women who are waiting for the groom, and some of them have prepared correctly and having enough lamp oil to be there and be prepared, and some of them did not. Well, they've all interfered with the same problem. The guy was late. He was supposed to come during the day or maybe a couple days earlier, but he took longer than they thought they were going to. And now we need more oil for our lamps. So a bad thing happened to these ladies. And the ones that were prepared got through it. So you can say that they all were a victim of this guy's lateness. But some of them had prepared an action to go through it. Some of them had shared with each other and so on and so forth. So what I want to do is look in our life saying, Jesus isn't calling for us to say something bad happened to us, now just lay down and don't do anything about it, but actually to figure out what the true problem is and overcome it, whether it be in actions in the time, retrospect, looking at what happened so I can fix my current situation, or seeing a problem that's going to come down the pipeline and trying to prepare for it. To me, that's more Christian than sitting down and saying, woe is me. And I also get that to some people who are trying to weaponize dirty wounds, as you've been calling it, that makes me a bad person. But to me, that's looking at the way Christ called it. So again, if I'm using the wrong analogy point from Jesus, I don't want to do that, but that's kind of how I was seeing it.
Yeah, well, and those are it's a fair parable to apply to ourselves, and that's an important thing to do. I need to be as prepared as I can be to meet the bridegroom when he comes, and I should start right now, as soon as I hear the parable. And I think that's the intention of Jesus in sharing that parable. It's dangerous when we start applying it to other people. Well, I deserve to be there because I've kept my lamp full, and you don't deserve to be there because you've emptied your lamp out. Well, there's a whole lot more going on. And I'm not saying this is not a direct commentary on what you just said or what you think, Joe, but just to make the observation. Um, because there are a lot of, you said you got to work on yourself. So one of the things is, in order to work on ourselves, someone needs to believe in us. And that's something that I can't really control for myself. And that's the kind of thing that's sometimes missing in people's lives is they don't have anybody that believes in them. And if we look at them and say, well, look, your life is a mess, go work on yourself. Well, it's like, are you willing to roll up your sleeves and help them to work on themselves? Are you willing to step into their situation? And they've been told for so long that they're useless and will amount to nothing. Are you willing to stay in the ring with them until they actually believe that they are beautiful and can amount to something? And I think that's where we get into danger when we start making judgments on other people's lives, or when we start to apply these things to other people, that we imagine everybody is on the same playing field, when in fact, when you've gotten to the point of homelessness, there's a lot of stuff going on there. And when you say we've all had hard times, I have not been violently abused sexually or physically. I haven't been told by the person who should love me unconditionally that I'm useless, or I haven't been used as a drug runner for my, drug dealer dad. I mean, it's not really true. I haven't suffered like other people have suffered. I have had people my whole life who have believed in me, supported me, provided for me, and given me opportunities. And I simply can't make the comparison between myself and someone else. So, but if I start investing in someone, are they willing to, I'm willing to stay in the ring with them. Are they willing to stay in the ring with me? And I don't want to say that there's no free will. Of course there is. But just it's always it's a little touchy to understand how much input there's been. So there's one of the monastic fathers, Saint Dorotheus of Gaza, who tells this parable, and I won't get all the details right, but he basically says two twin girls they're orphaned, and then they're sold into, well, let's say they're adopted to make the parable a little less convoluted. They're adopted into two different situations. One is adopted by a loving Christian woman who provides everything for her, believes in her, supports her, and helps her to become a virtuous woman. The other is adopted into a band of gypsies. Well, let's not even say that. Into a circus with prostitutes, and is basically formed as a kind of sex slave. And um, now, when one of them commits sin, is it on the same par as the other one? Is basically the question that he comes to, and then just says, like, we're just not in a position to judge where people are, and so that's where we want to provide what we can provide for the person, to do our best. And all of us are not in the same position. I don't work directly with homeless people or at homeless shelters, and I love the people who do and get to know the people in those situations. They understand, they can see the ones who are really ready to receive help, who have sort of hit rock bottom, who are vulnerable in a way that they're open to being supported. They can see other ones who are still kind of posturing, and they're trying to get what they can out of the system. They're trying to extract without giving. They're not willing to take the risk of letting someone really into their lives. They're trying to weaponize their dirty wounds, as we talked about, or trying to manipulate the system so they can just get what they can out of it. And it's there's a survival skill that's active there, but there's an unwillingness to grow. And so there are those different situations that, if we're in the position of helping, we have to make some prudential judgments around where people are. But yeah, I just think it's always important to realize, like, there's a lot more going on there. That's why we are not the judge. God is the judge. He's the only one that knows all the circumstances, and that knows where people's will was really engaged, where they really actively resisted help, where they've really developed vicious behavior, where they have cultivated ill will or malice toward others. God alone knows where the line is between what is a genuine consequence of terrible example and suffering that someone has gone through, and where it's a willful resistance to being helped and things like that. So yeah, anyway, I just think it's important to not cast everybody into the same category, and to be sensitive to those realities.
Certainly. And part of your job as a parent is to put them into your children into a better starting situation. That's part of what you're
Absolutely.
called to do. Um, but that being said, I did want to conclude this episode on your final point there that God is always there with us, and oftentimes praying to Him for someone to help us or to get that positive word of advice, it will come. And that's something that I wanted to point out, that creating an encounter with God that will, for something that you need, will normally produce some fruits. So with that being said, we definitely thank everyone for listening here today, and we will be with you again here next week. Thank you.